The first alerts hit military command centers at exactly 15:34 local time on March 15, 2025. A U.S. Air Force F-16 Fighting Falcon had been shot down along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. The pilot was dead, and within hours, the entire region would be on the brink of war. But this story doesn't begin with the shootdown. It begins 57 minutes earlier, with a routine patrol mission that was about to go catastrophically wrong. Captain Jake Morrison, call sign Hawk, was a 35-year-old F-16 pilot from Colorado Springs with over 2,000 flight hours and 3 combat tours under his belt. On this particular Thursday afternoon, he was flying what the Air Force calls a standard CAP mission, Combat Air Patrol, along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. His job was simple: monitor Taliban movements, track suspicious convoys, and provide air support if ground forces needed it. Nothing he hadn't done 100 times before. At 14:37, Morrison's F-16 lifted off from Bagram Airfield carrying a standard weapons loadout: 2 AIM-120 air-to-air missiles, 2 AIM-9 Sidewinders, and a full load of 20mm cannon rounds. Weather conditions were perfect: clear skies, unlimited visibility, no threats on radar. Just another day in America's longest war. Morrison radioed back to Bagram Tower, proceeding to Waypoint Delta. It's a beautiful day for flying. His voice was calm, almost bored, routine. But 47 minutes into his flight, something went wrong with his navigation systems. Morrison's GPS began showing erratic readings. His coordinates were jumping. The screen flickered. He was experiencing what military analysts would later determine was a sophisticated GPS spoofing attack. Someone was feeding false signals to his aircraft, deliberately confusing his navigation. Morrison didn't panic. He was too experienced for that. He tried recalibrating his systems, cross-checking with his backup instruments, attempting to re-establish accurate positioning. But in those crucial seconds of distraction, his F-16 drifted across an invisible line in the sky. A line that existed only on maps but carried deadly consequences. He had entered Pakistani airspace, 3.2 kilometers inside the border, enough to trigger protocols that had been in place since the complicated, often hostile relationship between the United States and Pakistan had deteriorated after years of mutual distrust, drone strikes, and accusations of harboring terrorists. At Peshawar Air Base, 85 kilometers away, Pakistani Air Defense Command radar operators saw the violation immediately. An unidentified aircraft, military, fast-moving, armed, had crossed into sovereign Pakistani airspace without authorization. Alert sirens wailed, officers scrambled, and within 90 seconds, 2 Pakistani JF-17 Thunder fighters were racing down the runway, afterburners screaming. The JF-17 is a lightweight multi-role fighter, jointly developed by Pakistan and China. It's not as advanced as an American F-16, but it's fast, maneuverable, and in the hands of skilled pilots, absolutely lethal. Squadron leader Imran Khalid and Flight Lieutenant Asad Khan were airborne in under 4 minutes, climbing hard toward the border intercept point. Pakistani ground control gave them authorization that would change everything. Thunderflight, you are weapons-free. Hostile aircraft in Pakistani airspace. Intercept and force to land. If target does not comply, you are authorized to engage. Weapons-free. Those 2 words meant the Pakistani pilots had permission to shoot. Meanwhile, Captain Morrison had finally realized his mistake. His GPS was still glitching, but his backup instruments confirmed what he had feared. He had crossed the border. He immediately began turning north, trying to get back into Afghan airspace. He radioed Bagram. Bagram Control, Viper 1. I think I drifted into Pakistani airspace. GPS malfunction. I'm RTB, returning to base. Bagram's response was urgent. Viper 1, expedite egress immediately. We're showing Pakistani fighters inbound to your position. Morrison saw them on radar before his eyes confirmed it. 2 fast movers closing at 450 knots, JF-17s, Pakistani Air Force, and they were coming in hot. Bagram, I have visual on 2 Pakistani fighters. They're locking me up. Morrison's voice, for the first time, carried an edge of real concern. The Pakistani pilots broadcast on international emergency frequency, demanding Morrison land immediately at a Pakistani airfield. Morrison responded, trying to explain the GPS malfunction, requesting permission to simply exit their airspace. But Squadron Leader Khalid had his orders. The American jet had violated Pakistani sovereignty. It needed to land. Now. Morrison refused. He was already turned toward Afghanistan. He was leaving. There was no threat, no reason to land in a potentially hostile nation where he might be detained, interrogated, or worse. That's when Squadron Leader Khalid received updated orders from Pakistani command. The American jet was not complying. It was considered hostile. An authorization to engage was confirmed. Khalid's JF-17 locked onto Morrison's F-16 with a Chinese-made PL-5 air-to-air missile. The F-16's threat warning system screamed in Morrison's headset. He deployed countermeasures, flares and chaff bursting from his aircraft in a desperate attempt to confuse the incoming missile. He threw his F-16 into a violent evasive maneuver, pulling nearly 9 Gs as he dove toward the mountains. But the PL-5 tracked through the flares. Its infrared seeker stayed locked on the F-16's hot engine exhaust, and at a distance of less than 2 kilometers, the missile detonated. The explosion tore through the F-16's tail section, shredding control surfaces and severing hydraulic lines. Morrison's aircraft rolled violently, fire erupting from the damaged engine. Warning lights flooded his cockpit. He had seconds to make a decision: try to save the aircraft or eject. He reached for the ejection handle, but the F-16 was already in an uncontrollable spin. When Morrison pulled the handle, the ejection sequence initiated, but the aircraft's violent rotation meant he was ejected at a catastrophic angle. The seat fired, the parachute deployed, but Morrison's trajectory sent him directly into the F-16's debris field. He was killed instantly. The wreckage of his F-16 crashed into the mountains along the border. Pakistani forces would reach the site first, and the world would wake up to news that would dominate every headline. Pakistan had shot down an American fighter jet. An American pilot was dead, and the United States was preparing its response. Within 30 minutes, the Pentagon confirmed the loss. Within an hour, President's National Security Team was in emergency session. Within 2 hours, Pakistan's ambassador to the United States was summoned to the State Department and given a message so blunt it left no room for misinterpretation. An American serviceman has been killed by Pakistani forces. There will be consequences. Pakistan's response was defiant. The Foreign Ministry issued a statement claiming the F-16 had violated Pakistani airspace, ignored multiple warnings, and was engaged according to standard protocols. They demanded an apology. They claimed the U.S. was conducting unauthorized operations near their border, and they warned that any retaliation would be met with force. But retaliation was already in motion. At exactly 21:18 local time, less than 6 hours after Morrison's F-16 was destroyed, the night sky over Shahbaz Air Base in Pakistan's Punjab province erupted in fire. Multiple explosions ripped across the base, hangars disintegrated. Aircraft parked on the flight line were shredded by shrapnel. Fuel depots detonated in massive fireballs visible for miles. The base's control tower collapsed. Barracks housing Pakistani Air Force personnel were hit directly. The attack lasted less than 4 minutes. When it was over, Shahbaz Air Base, one of Pakistan's primary F-16 operational bases, was completely destroyed. Early casualty reports indicated at least 47 Pakistani military personnel killed, with dozens more wounded. 6 Pakistani F-16s were destroyed on the ground. Critical infrastructure was annihilated. But here's where the story gets even more complicated. Nobody knew who launched the attack. Pakistani officials immediately blamed the United States, claiming it was retaliation for shooting down the American F-16. The timing was too perfect, the precision too exact. This was American revenge. But the Pentagon issued an immediate and emphatic denial. The United States did not conduct any strikes against Pakistani territory, the Defense Secretary stated in an emergency press conference. We are investigating reports of an attack on Shahbaz Air Base, but U.S. forces were not involved. Pakistan didn't believe it. How could they? Their base had been destroyed by what survivors described as multiple cruise missiles, weapons that require sophisticated targeting, GPS guidance, and launch platforms that only a handful of nations possess. But U.S. officials pointed to a critical detail. American satellites and reconnaissance assets detected the missile launches, and they didn't come from any U.S. position. The missiles appeared to have been launched from somewhere in the Arabian Sea, but from what platform, nobody could confirm. Intelligence analysts began reviewing every piece of data. Satellite imagery was scrutinized, radar tracks were analyzed, and slowly, a disturbing picture began to emerge. The missiles that struck Shabazz Air Base were not American Tomahawks. They appeared to be a different design. Some analysts suggested they might be Russian Kaliber cruise missiles. Others thought they could be Chinese YJ-18s. A few even speculated about Iranian Sumar missiles. But who fired them, and why? 3 theories emerged, each more troubling than the last. Theory 1. The United States launched a covert retaliation using non-standard weapons to maintain plausible deniability. The Pentagon's denial was technically true. No official U.S. strike, but a black operation had taken revenge for Morrison's death. Theory 2. India seized the opportunity. Pakistan's greatest enemy had access to submarines and missiles capable of the strike. With tensions already high between the nuclear-armed neighbors, India might have used the chaos to deal a blow to Pakistan's Air Force while letting America take the blame. Theory 3. A third party, possibly China or Russia, launched the attack to destabilize the region, drive a wedge between the US and Pakistan, and create chaos that served their strategic interests. Each theory had evidence supporting it. None could be definitively proven. Pakistani officials demanded an international investigation. They called emergency meetings at the United Nations. They threatened to suspend all cooperation with U.S. forces in Afghanistan. Some hardline politicians even suggested closing Pakistani airspace to American military aircraft entirely. In Washington, the situation was unprecedented. An American pilot was dead, shot down by a supposed ally. A Pakistani military base was destroyed by unknown attackers, and nobody knew if they were on the edge of a wider conflict. The CIA launched an urgent investigation. Intelligence agencies worldwide were contacted. Satellite data was reviewed frame by frame, and slowly pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. The missiles had indeed been launched from a submarine in the Arabian Sea, but not an American submarine. Intelligence analysts identified the launch signatures as consistent with a Chinese Type 039A submarine, a diesel-electric attack sub that China had sold to Pakistan years earlier. Wait, Pakistan's own submarine? The investigation deepened, and what emerged was even more disturbing. The submarine had been hijacked, not physically, but electronically. A sophisticated cyber attack had compromised its command systems. Someone had taken control remotely, launched its missiles at Pakistani targets, and created the perfect false flag operation. But who had the capability to hack a Chinese-made submarine? Who had the motivation to attack Pakistan while framing the United States? The answer led investigators to a shadowy cyber warfare unit with links to multiple intelligence services. The operation was so sophisticated, so well planned, that attribution became almost impossible. It was the ultimate act of plausible deniability, an attack that could have been anyone, leaving all parties confused and on the brink of conflict. In the end, back-channel diplomacy prevented open war. The United States and Pakistan agreed to a joint investigation. Captain Morrison's death was ruled a tragic result of a GPS malfunction and miscommunication. Pakistan quietly acknowledged that the shootdown might have been avoidable. The destruction of Shabazz Air Base remained officially under investigation, though both sides privately understood what had happened. But the damage was done. Trust between the two nations, already fragile, was shattered. American operations in the region were scaled back. Pakistani cooperation became minimal, and the incident served as a stark reminder of how quickly modern warfare can spiral out of control. Captain Jake Morrison was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. He was posthumously promoted to major. His family received medals and condolences. But they also received questions that nobody could fully answer. Why did his GPS malfunction? Who spoofed the signal? And who really destroyed that Pakistani base? Some questions, it seems, are designed to remain unanswered. This is what modern conflict looks like. Not clear battles between uniformed armies, but shadowy operations, cyber warfare, plausible deniability, and attacks that leave more questions than answers. The line between ally and enemy becomes blurred. Technology becomes both weapon and vulnerability, and pilots like Captain Morrison become casualties of wars that nobody officially admits they're fighting. The incident lasted less than 24 hours from first shot to final explosion, but its implications will echo for years, because it proves something terrifying. In an age of GPS spoofing, cyber warfare, and remotely controlled weapons, even allies can become enemies in seconds. And the truth can be buried under so many layers of deception that finding it becomes impossible. Welcome to 21st Century Warfare, where nobody knows who really fired the first shot, or the last one.